From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Andrew the Triforce Howard. Most importantly, you are you. You are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. And fellow cryptid fans, friends and neighbors, we have something special for you this evening. I think we're all excited about this. I hope that's the case. We all love a cryptid episode, right?
Did we talk about in the past? We had to, because this seems like a question that would obviously come up. Are there no cryptid like fighting games or sort of Pokemon style or Magic the Gathering style card games? I feel like one came up.
There are characters that occur in there. I feel like that you're right. There has to be one because we know there are a couple of deity fighting games. We talked about that previously. And we know there are cryptozoological characters that occur in like Magic the Gathering and so on.
There's a game on Steam called Beasts of Mystery. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to see Mothman fight the Flatwoods monster? Well, now you can find out in Beasts of Mystery, the cryptid fighting game with hand-drawn animation and approachable gameplay inspired by the greatest fighting games of past and present.
What a time to be alive.
I know, right?
What a time, May 23rd, 2025. As we record this, we're going to talk about one cryptid that may not be in Beast of Mystery and may not be familiar to a lot of us in the West. Our exploration takes us far, far from our home base of the Atlanta metro area to the rugged, mountainous, and forbidding interior of the Hubei province in China. Also, in the research here, I don't know about you guys, I learned a new word. We've got a local sparkling water company here called Montaigne. Did you guys know Montaigne's an actual word? I thought it was like a car name, like you made up something that sounded like a real thing.
I guess it just sounds like a sort of like a crooner from the 50s, you know, Johnny Montaigne.
Sounds like Fontaine to me.
That's
which is something I'm familiar with our buddy Bree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That would be Jabri, right?
Yeah.
And our buddy Pre, the famous runner, right? Wasn't it Prefontaine? Wasn't that the dude?
Oh,
That's where
okay.
it all comes from. Yeah.
And Montaigne, just for any etymology nerds, is a word that weirdly I don't think we had encountered before. I didn't know it was a real word. It means of growing in or inhabiting mountain areas.
Nice. That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
That's what, really, it's my fault for not having a good vocabulary. That was like, this sparkling water company just made up a BS word anyway.
Man, I got to call you out for being self-deprecating there to a fault. You have the best vocabulary of anybody that I know.
No, if you have a bad vocabulary, then
I don't know what I am.
I'm a dumb ass.
Not at all.
Can I really quickly just say this Beasts of Mystery game, not to harp on it too, it looks like it was created in MS Paint. So that alone is worth the price of admission. Do check it out. It looks ridiculous.
Oh, and Triforce points out there are a couple of Japanese role-playing games with yokai. I am in, dude. Yokai are amazing.
Well, the guy we're talking about today is a little bit yokai-esque, though it's not from Japan. It is from China, but it has that mythical quality, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. For thousands and thousands of years, local rural populations in Hubei have been convinced they share the land with something not quite ape, not quite human.
Not quite skunk.
Not quite skunk, not quite swamp, not quite abominable.
It's a thing, though. It is a bit of a thing.
Yeah, it's a huge thing. We've all heard of Bigfoot. We've heard of the abominable snowman, but what about the Yeren? And by the way, what the heck is Yeren fever? We're going to pause for a second, check in with our our medical experts to make sure we're still inoculated. Here are the facts. When we talk about Bigfoot, and we've run into this so often over the years, we continually see this strange, near ubiquitous ancient myth about something that inevitably translates to either wild men or hairy men.
And one of my favorite Bigfoot superpowers, I guess, that he would be able to use in a fighting game is this idea that he can teleport, or that he can sort of fold time and space. And maybe that accounts for some of the proliferation of these types of creatures, globally speaking.
Interesting. And that's something our good friend David Becerra remarked about briefly when we interviewed him. How long ago was that?
Those many years ago. And what is it called, guys? Operation Bigfoot. There
Expedition
in LJ.
Bigfoot.
See? Expedition.
Yeah.
But it very much is that. And I know we harp on it every time, but like it has the quality level, the build quality of like a really rad
Studios.
Disney Universal Studios type exhibit.
Yeah.
It is pretty badass. If you find yourself in the North Georgia mountains, do give it a check.
And make a day of it. Yeah, Cherry Log near LJ, and make a day of it because it's also right up the road from a place where you can rent a tank, which our accounting department did not allow us to do.
Denied.
Yes.
I'm not going to let go of that.
Yeah. Yes. And just to the point of the number of hairy man, wild man stories that exist even within the U.S. and the different varieties of it.
Sure.
We had another person we ended up speaking to that makes this thing called Map in Black. You can check it out. All of us have a copy now at this point.
Thank you, Matt.
And it shows, well, it's not from me. It's from a listener.
Yeah, but you got us the maps. Thank you.
Well, he sent us the maps.
Oh.
But the concept here is that there are spread across just the United States. I think I want to say around 5 or 6 varieties of this specific form of cryptid just here in the U.S. And then you look globally, there's so many more.
Yeah, it proliferates. That's a great point too. I remember seeing that map and thinking, this is somewhat similar to regional variations of squirrels. Right. Or where, and if it's a natural organism, that makes sense. Living in the same place over vast swaths of time. It's weird because everything we find when we look into historical strangeness is that no matter how different a given culture may be, or when that culture occurs, they share surprising commonalities. Like every single human civilization throughout history has at one point managed to predict the passage of the seasons, and they have all attempted to explain the movements of the heavens in relation to the earth. But the other really strange thing is this weird myth that continues in the modern day. Like you said, Matt, we call it Bigfoot. Regional variations here would be swamp ape, skunk ape, the Urali from native culture and so on. You can find ancient petroglyphs depicting hairy people and then the entire lore about them. And this dates back, thousands of years. You also, to that point again, you hear legends about this in other parts of the world, often remote mountainous wildernesses, right? Or stretches of forest cover. Russia had a lot, or the Soviet Union, I should say, had a lot of research into this, as did pre-communist Russia. And then you'll hear about the Yeti, the snowman, and of course in China, the Yeren. But they're all variations on the same idea that Homo sapiens shares Earth with some reclusive, enigmatic, oddly intelligent species of something that looks a little like a human, a little bit like an ape. And I think, or I would posit, guys, that in some of our previous explorations, we found a really good answer for some of these common legends, not just Bigfoot stuff, but things like trolls or orcs or goblins or hobbits, and they were kind of kissing cousins to the humans.
Yeah, and this extends into the modern day, this legacy of ancient hominids and remains in the form of trace amounts of DNA that's found in some modern humans. Unfortunately, not those actual facts hobbits that you mentioned, Ben, Homo floresiensis. Though I don't think there are Tolkien-esque hobbits, that have their own little hobbit holes and don't like their china to be and don't like their plates to be chipped and cracked.
Yeah. We haven't found the Bilbo Baggins yet. But I love the point you're making there, Noel, the so-called hobbits of Southeast Asia, along with the Denisovans. You mentioned the poor Neanderthal. Further, current science theorizes humanity may discover yet more evidence of these ancient Homo sapien hominid interactions, and maybe even hidden somewhere in human DNA, remnant lines of other hominid groups. We don't know. That's the pickle of it. And if you're a scientist, that's either very exciting or very frustrating. If you're a team of hapless podcasters, that's amazing, because that's an episode if we find one.
For sure. So
with all this in mind, folks, we have proven that things close to human existed at the same time as modern Homo sapiens. And we also have solid proof through, as you said, Noel, DNA evidence that these groups interacted. So there's this compelling argument that at least some of these Bigfoot myths could be based on oral history about genuine encounters with these things not quite Homo sapien. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Ooh, just a quick shout out to you yourself, Mr. Ben Bolin. You gifted both Matt Frederick and myself a lovely graphic novel version of the book Sapiens. Incredible illustrated volume. I think it's part 1 of this book, but it is absolutely fantastic. I haven't made my way all the way through it yet, but it talks a lot about these Denisovans and some of these early hominids, and beautifully illustrates what that world might have looked like.
Oh, man, Yuval Noah Harari. What a guy.
Yeah, and what a cool project to translate to visuals in that way.
Agreed, man. That guy is, I love the way he writes. So as any fan of the History Channel can assure you, there is no shortage of attempts to document Bigfoot or even to capture a living specimen. We don't want to sound hyperbolic, but to date, as far as modern science is concerned, all of these attempts have failed. Every single one. Even the expeditions that found, the purported Yeti scalp, later testing proved, I think it was from like a mountain goat or something of that nature. Yeah. Still, it's important. We have to remember that even when science fails to find the thing it's looking for, it has at least provided value by establishing that thing does not exist. But what if we're looking in the wrong place? What if the real Bigfoot is not in the Pacific Northwest, but instead, what if it's half a world away, deep into the interior of China? Unlike Western science's overall dismissal of Bigfoot, China seriously, scientifically investigated this creature's existence, and it became a social phenomenon. It became like a good version of a moral panic. It hit the zeitgeist. Yeah.
That is kind of like that concept that we talked about with John Cameron Mitchell.
Yeah.
Correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. The opposite of paranoia, which is pronoia. I guess it is inherently misinformed belief that other people are trying to help you. I don't know if that misinformed aspect is key to it, but man, I love the idea of a positive moral panic.
Yeah, a moral euphoria.
A moral panic. We're doing a good job with this panic. We're doing it morally.
So let's get into it now. Here's where it gets crazy. This is the story of the Yeren. It's a weird word. In translation, you would spell it Y-E-R-E-N. People are going to throw, little diacritics at different points or little accent marks. But it roughly translates to savage or wild man in Mandarin. So it'd be like Yeren or Cantonese Suetjin. We should go ahead, I think, and say, or at least I have to say, we are not native Mandarin speakers. We don't speak the dialects that we are going to be approaching in part of this. So please bear with us. And what about this, guys? If we're not sure about our pronunciation, maybe we just spell the word.
Yeah, and I will also defer to Ben because you have done some studies of the language. All I've done is seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Which is, they make you watch that when you study Chinese.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I do remember that being the first time it was like identified as this is like a dialect, a particular dialect of Mandarin that was used in that film, at least in my experience. But I'm also joking, Ben. You really do have kind of expertise and studied time on this stuff. So, but we will do our level best as always.
It's too kind, Noel, and got to be honest, as anybody who studied Chinese knows, they really string you along with Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. They make you watch it early, and they strongly imply that you'll learn how to run and jump from treetops.
Okay. Secretly, though, guys, they used wires.
That's the word on the street, and that's why I got a B+ instead of an A.
Beautiful movie, though, and that freaking soundtrack with Yo-Yo Ma. Oh, my God. Excellent stuff.
It's amazing, this thing, the Yeren, is often referred to as sort of the Chinese version of the Tibetan Yeti, kind of like how the skunk ape or swamp ape might be referred to as the insert region X here version of the Bigfoot.
It's interesting that it's that. Okay, so I don't know much about this as well, but I do know that we're basically talking about a forested area. Is it an area... Do we know if it is covered in snow often? It seems just from its latitude that it maybe isn't covered in snow that often.
Exactly. It's a much more hospitable region to wildlife than, say, Everest or the upper reaches of the Himalayas. It's the Shenangjia Forestry District. I messed up the tone there. If you had to pick a spot for the Chinese Bigfoot, this would be peak real estate.
Okay.
It's free real estate. It's like about more than 1,200 square miles of mountainous forest, right? Just approaching the timberline, right? Which makes it technically montane. There we go. And it's the elevation is pretty high, about 6,500 to 6,900 feet up.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like, it's a pretty dope spot if you're looking for a creature like this.
Well, it does make sense then why the Yeti would be the comparison there, because of it must get highly cold there at times, simply because of the elevation, which is why you may see it as more of a snow creature than the way we would imagine a Bigfoot, which is very much just a forest boy, just in the tree line, in the trees, not with the even the coloring of the fur, if there is fur.
Yeah, that's a great point. It also reminds me of the various, I can't remember the specific cards in Magic the Gathering, but the various troll specializations, right? Aren't there different kinds of trolls? I might be thinking of something different.
You got your bridge trolls.
You
got your
mall trolls.
What are the ones with the funny hair and the jewels in their belly buttons?
Troll dolls.
That's the one. Yeah.
You got your doll trolls.
Is a Smurf a kind of troll?
A Smurf is more akin to a smaller forest spirit, maybe like a brownie, a gnome.
Do you know what they call the Smurfs in Germany?
What do they call the Smurfs in Germany?
Die Strumpfen.
I like that. That sounds
true.
Why does everything sound so aggressive in that language? I'm so prejudiced. All right, sorry. But this area, I'm thinking in terms of, again, regional variations like with squirrels or whatever, geographic variations. I'm thinking it would make sense, to your point, Matt, for a very similar kind of animal to adapt to different environmental pressures. And this forest we're talking about is one of the most biodiverse areas in the nation. It's home to tons of rare species with pretty great names.
Correct. Per our pals over at UNESCO and their delightful World Heritage Sites, the area in question here is already home to tons of actual facts, to quote Lauren Vogelbaum, identifiable species like the Chinese giant salamander, the golden or Sichuan snub-nosed monkey.
I don't like him.
He's too snub-nosed. He's so snobby. What's up with that? Why has he got his nose turned up like that?
And also, there's the clouded leopard.
What makes it clouded? Is it just something about its pattern?
No, it's sketchy and it has a bad memory.
Got it. Fair enough. And then we've also got the much less remarkable common leopard, which I don't know why that even made the list, to be honest, guys.
It's crazy because they're, I don't know, to the point about slightly different regions. It's not, neither of these are the same as the snow leopard, right? So it feels like there's a gradation there from common to clouded to snow. I don't know. Anyway,
it's also just something to note there. There are dangerous species in these forests, right? That you should be aware of if you're going to be trekking out there looking for stuff. And also there are things like the Chinese giant salamander that don't seem real. It doesn't seem like a salamander should get that large. If you've seen pictures of it, I remember watching a video way back in the day of one of the largest salamanders ever, in captivity or was caught. And these things are huge. It looks like the size of a dog, but it is a salamander.
So it's not just a clever name.
No. They are actually giant in comparison to the vast majority of salamanders. And they're kind of cool, man. I'll be honest. They're no Asian black bear because those guys are hanging out in this area as well. It's just important for us to establish the biodiversity here. It's another point to the argument for the real estate, right? Especially in a country that is rapidly industrialized over such a short span of time. Often in the West, when you see pictures of China, you see pictures of these crazy factories, right? These huge works of human beings, or you see a picture of a panda in the middle of nowhere that is just doing its best to figure out how to eat bamboo.
Oh yeah,
looking a little lonely. I'm not gonna lie. He's a panda friend.
Oh yes, and pop Hubei province into your maps.
Well done.
Google.
Holy cow! Good job.
But yeah, pop it into your maps app and just look at the spaces between the civilization Ben's talking about, that the way the expansion is occurring, right? And you can really see exactly what Ben is saying. There are still extremely remote areas here where there's just humans are not there.
Yeah. Even in such a populous country, the population of China is huge, but it's quite unevenly distributed. So such that, you think most Americans live in cities or urban areas. You're absolutely right. But that is exacerbated in China, so much so that the current government has some hard laws about who can move where and when and why. And you have to get a license to do so.
And do you know what's in the eastern side of Hubei province?
What's in the eastern side of Hubei province?
Wuhan.
I got you all in check.
Yeah.
Wuhan clan, home of the famous Wuhan clan.
And I still am so flummoxed by. I remember when Wuhan came out, not Wuhan, and when Wuhan came out, I was texting with some fellow hip hop heads, and this was I had not searched the lyrics myself, and I thought when he was saying, stuff like, "I've got that eggnog shit that makes you sweat your neck. Hoo-ha, I've got you all in check." And I thought it was CZECH. And
I'm certain this has come up before. Ben.
I remember
this is ringing a bell.
Not to tell the same story twice, but I hated for that myth to be busted, because I love the idea that New York slang was just that extreme and wild, and it still is very colorful and wild.
It sure is. And what on earth is a flip mode squad? I've never fully wrapped my head around that.
You haven't flipped?
Nah, well, never. No, I am loyal. I would never flip, Ben.
So
I don't drop a dime on no one.
So the reason we're especially not in this economy, but the reason we're bringing up the idea of busting the myth is because in our conversations with some of our friends who have searched for Bigfoot or other cryptids, you get the feeling at times that maybe they don't want to find the thing. Maybe it's more about the journey. And so maybe I should have never checked on those Busta Rhymes lyrics and kept the mystery alive. But even without the hunt for a creature called a cryptid like the Yeren, this area has been a hotbed for scientific inquiry. From 1884 to 1889 alone, scientists found more than 500 new species of plant. It was kind of like that older movie with Sean Connery in the Amazon, Medicine Man, where
dude, that was not a good movie.
It was not a good movie. The premise was that he's the guy who is an outsider, but he knows the jungle. He discovers these new species, and he's like fighting big pharma or something like that.
And I believe the love interest is Elaine Bracco, Dr. Melfi from The Sopranos.
Oh.
And of course, Goodfellas as well.
And so we know that people have been searching this area. They've found strange animals already. They've found things that were not known to exist in the larger scientific record. And as we record today, there are certainly more plants and perhaps even animals that are still out there waiting to be discovered. Before we continue, we've got to point out that we're getting a lot of this information on the Yeren from one of the best academic Western sources out there. It's a book called The People's Peking Man, Popular Science and Human Identity in 20th Century China, written by Sigrid Schmalzer. And this was
what a great name.
Sorry. I know, right? And this was published in 2008. So as the world of this kind of literature goes, and as the world of cryptozoology goes, it's kind of recent, It's not a breathless yellow journalism headline.
Oh yeah. But we've also found a bunch of sources from the late 90s up into pretty recently, 2024, where there are active discussions of the search for this specific cryptid for through all of that time span.
Yes, very much so. And so deep do these searches go that it would be impossible for us to name every single expedition in this episode alone, but we'll take you through several of the possibilities here as we get to the search. As a matter of fact, maybe now that we've done some intros for our sources, we pause for a word from our sponsors and then dive in. All right. Mountain Mama, take me home. Country Road.
Country Road. The cat returns. Right? Yeah.
And so we return to Sigrid Schmalzer, who traces the Chinese search for the Yeren from the days of ancient folklore to the discovery of something called the Peking Man. And we've all heard about the Peking Man, which was for a long time considered a legend until it was discovered, or hard evidence like fossils were discovered in the 1920s. It's a kind of Homo erectus.
Correct. The Peking Man was a prominent symbol of bringing science to the people. That's kind of cool as a post-revolutionary bit of kind of positive communist propaganda, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, because we know that during the communist revolution, the new government was seeking to reframe popular narratives, right? This is the people's move. This is a world wherein the history of humankind is a history of progress through labor, through secular learning. This is not a result of divine intervention, ghost spirits, or the supernatural.
That's interesting. So sort of an imposed enlightenment and a mandated step away from the religious toward the secular.
Yeah, and I like imposed enlightenment. That's a really great term for this, because we see, even now in Chinese authorities have a bad reaction to films with ghosts in them, things like that.
Ben, I was thinking about this when looking through your research doc before we went on the air, and it occurred to me that a lot of American films, when they get Chinese releases, they have to be recut almost entirely to remove mentions of the supernatural.
Yeah, which we discussed in our previous episode.
That's what I thought.
Yeah,
but isn't that a sort of aligned
100%.
with that shift?
100%, dude, 100%. And so as this government is seeking to undermine religion, to move people away from previous superstitions, they also want to champion socialism and advance science. So if you go to chapter 7 of Schmalzer's work in specific, you get this fascinating anecdote that tells us how this phase of Yeren fervor, or urine fever, I should say, and scientific investigation began.
When you just say urine fever, it's funny.
Yeah. Well, if you like terrible puns, you're in luck.
Yay.
So we got some more ahead. Let's share the story, guys. Like how did this go from a thing of legend and folklore to a rush of scientific investigation?
Well, so let's begin with just the Peking Man, at least reconstructions of some of the shards of the Peking Man skull and pieces of the Peking Man skull were thought to be Homo erectus. So a version of human before the version of us. And there are a couple of professors there in 1956 that are checking it out. It's the opening ceremonies of the Beijing Natural History Museum. They're looking at this reconstruction of the Peking Man's skull, and one of them made a little statement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's professors Mao Guangyan and Wang Xiaolin. And Mao is looking at this stuff. These guys are both vetted professors, as you said. And he hears his colleague Wang say, "This Yeren, I've seen it before." And Mao says, basically, "What is wrong with you? Are your nerves all right? Do you have a fever? Bro, Peking Man is a human ancestor from 500,000 years ago. How could you have seen one living with your own eyes?"
Oh, man, he's already talking about the fever. Wang goes on to explain that back in 1940, while on safari or on an expedition for the Yellow River Water Control Committee, he and others in his group came across this sort of half-ape, half-human chimera hybrid kind of creature who had been shot dead by indigenous folks or folks local to that area. So let's keep in mind that these aren't just two, crotchety old get off my lawn type dudes shooting the breeze, at the local coffee shop, tea shop, passing around tall tales, spinning yarns. No, these are experts in their fields, vetted professors, and their conversation at the museum launched Mao and other like-minded colleagues into, you guessed it, that full-blown urine fever.
Yellow River, urine fever. Come on, guys. What's going on here?
Think about it. Picture us as Charlie Day by the Red String board. And just think about it. Okay?
But it does make sense, right? Okay, so if one of these vetted professors says, "Hey, I've seen this thing before." Oh, yeah, no, I have this specific instance where I saw something very much like this dead, like a version of it now. It would make you, as a professor, want to go check that out because, my God, guys, if there are versions of humanity that still exist somewhere deep in a cave system, deep in a forest system, somewhere that's hidden, a population that is specifically attempting to hide from all of the stuff outside of their world, then it would be awesome to find it, right? You're at least, as a professor, you're going to get some grants off of that, right? Sorry, don't mean to make it about money, but.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's about money. It's about the things beyond money, like prestige and legacy, right? And I think this is a fantastic point because it also incorporates some incredibly important social context. Mao had probably heard stories like this fourth or fifth hand from rural populations. But even at the time when all people were supposed to be equal under the party, there was a ton of prejudice from urban elites against rural people. The phrase translates to stuff like country bumpkin. So they had all these stereotypes about people who lived outside of the cities. This doesn't have that stereotype apply. It's a respected colleague, right? Well, we've both been to school, etc. We have, quote unquote, seen the world or read about it. And because of this, we see the origins of Yeren fever. Now, it doesn't take off right away. It's a bit artsy, like if you've ever met an academic in Williamsburg or Brooklyn. It's a bit rarefied air. The 1950s, 1960s, you see these relatively, comparatively small-scale research efforts on Yeren, documenting historical records, maybe sending a few expeditions, and these occur thanks to the work of Mao in particular. Again, not Mao Zedong, different Mao, and then there are other Chinese scientists who kind of Wu-tang in on this, namely folks from what's called the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology, or IVPPP. See, not going to let you down. Right, PPT. For about 2 decades after that museum conversation, the idea that we could leverage science to learn more about this it was restricted to some rural communities and intellectuals who were at that time, frankly, considered eccentric. And Mao was a one-man army for a minute. He was looking at possible relations between the Yeren stories and legends of the Yeti. He was looking at fossil records of apes and hominids. He was doing some bone comparison of modern humans. And the further he went, even starting so skeptically, the further he went, the more convinced he was that he was on to something.
So in the closing years of the Cultural Revolution in China, which was kind of a big deal and not quite as cool as it sounds, guys, right? Doesn't it sound like a positive thing, like a really positive sea change? But it was very much an iron-fisted grasp over culture. And that was the revolution in question, right, Ben?
Yes, sir. That's right. No, the idea was that we can get rid of all the beliefs of the past. We need to embrace
clean
secular
house
science. Yeah, clean house will remake the foundations of the house. It's a lot of people died, right? And
exactly.
a lot, and there, the idea of human rights is something that gets thrown out the window.
Oh, there's so many good little things about communism. No one's just figured out how to do it well.
I mean,
socialism maybe more so, but it's crazy how it starts off with good intentions and inevitably becomes a totalitarian dictatorship wherein anybody who is different is squashed.
And what makes the Yeren such an electric, galvanizing subject of interest and research, it happens because of the social context in which this exploration occurs. It goes down to really three major factors. I don't know if we want to walk through these briefly, but I think they tell us about the story.
So at this point, some of these extreme, very aggressive political campaigns that sort of typified the beginning of the Cultural Revolution were starting to die down. So people were starting to be a little less afraid of the consequences of associating themselves with things that were identified as superstitious. This started to be perhaps a little bit of a sense of maybe things were going to improve, perhaps, or that, I don't know, people were a little less terrified of stepping out and owning these, past beliefs.
Yeah, kind of like pilots and military aviation professionals reporting strange stuff in the sky. Once one person is coming out and talking about it and not getting punished, other people feel less hesitant to do so themselves.
Especially now that we even have government acknowledgement of some of those things to some degree. It feels like it does open the floodgates.
Mm-hmm. And then so people are less hesitant to talk about this stuff.
That's right.
Second, a lot of Western writing is newly available. We're scientists in China. We can't wait to read and translate this stuff. We have received a directive, right, to push forward with science. And while we're reading this stuff, we find loads of reports from our neighbors to the north, Russia, Soviet Union, on their version of this kind of cryptid. We see a lot of stuff about Yeti and Bigfoot because that stuff was already in those other cultural zeitgeist. It was already getting written about a lot. So people are therefore more likely to read about things related to this. And then what do we do when we read about something happening somewhere else? We immediately try to connect it to something closer to home. And that's what occurred.
We talked about it in a couple of our primary Bigfoot episodes about sightings in the U.S. were occurring back in the 1800s, right? With logging camps, like way back in the day. People were seeing stuff, weird stuff, hairy wild guys out there in the forest as the forests are being chopped down. And you can only imagine that if those stories had been around for so long, it's exactly right, Ben. You want to find the ones that are out near you, if there are these things.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Especially when you see those, the reports grow more vague the further back we go in history. But now you're one of these Chinese scientists, researchers, you start reading about indigenous people's stories, right, in the Americas, in North America, on that continent specifically. And then you start saying, hang on a tick. I remember, because you're unreasonably British. You're like, hang on a tick. I remember these stories kind of beat for beat go with the stories we ignored from all those country bumpkins, all those peasants. What if they were onto something? They can't figure it out, but me, A learned man? Well, tally ho, they said in
Pip pip and tickety boo.
Right. And so now, because like the point you made, Noel, it's easier to publish things without being arrested, right? Without being a target of a political campaign. Now people are able to publish more easily, and there is a proliferation, therefore, of popular science and science fiction. And the Yeren is the perfect subject for this. It touches evolution. It touches the identity of the wild and the urban. It touches what it means to be a modern human and the importance of science. So these three factors combine, and they make a feedback loop, an Ouroboros of interest and reading and publishing that begins to consume itself and grow, which is not how consuming oneself works. We're going to leave that analogy. It's been a weird week for all of us. We'll pause for a word from our sponsors, and then we'll get to the hunt, because there are some human characters in this story just as important as the Yeren itself.
And we've returned. Let's get to the actual physical attempt to find a Yeren. And we are jumping to a gentleman named Li Jian. This is an historian. He is working as the vice secretary of a propaganda department in this area that we talked about, Shenongjia.
And think about it, propaganda. Just going to point that out.
Yeah, right? Propaganda, which it's information that seeks to sway somebody to whoever's writing it or whoever's controlling the writings, way of thinking. So propaganda guy, vice secretary, in the same area where this Shenongjia forest is, he began collecting all kinds of reports from people who had been out in the forested area who had said, hey, I saw something that I can't explain. I believe it's one of these Yeren things. Think local villagers here, locals that have been seeing this for years, going all the way back to 1945. This person, Lee, gained the nickname the Minister of Yeren.
Yeah.
The Yellow King himself.
Yeren,
well
sorry.
Yeren, yes. And so in 1976, the stuff he's collected, it gets the attention of a guy who's a professor of evolutionary theory in East China Normal University. His name is Liu Minshuang, and he goes on to become the most prolific writer about Yeren in China. And again, he's a professor, so he gets a nickname as well, the Professor of Yeren. I do think if we're going with the P puns, Minister of Yeren is probably a better name. Professor of Yeren feels weird, even though we know urologists are a real thing. Anyway, other scientists, including those from the IVPP, jump on board, and Schmalzer says there are teams of scientists and technicians, local officials, and rural people who have had eyewitness accounts. They start tracking the Yeren in earnest. They get dozens of reports. They find footprints, even a few alleged hair samples. And by 1977, scientists are publishing articles about this in popular science magazines, but also they're publishing serious scientific research. These are where you see magazines like Scientific Experiment and an outfit called Fossils, which is the publication of IVPP. And then general interest magazines and newspapers start carrying stories about the investigation, referencing this other stuff. This is a huge win, because unlike other Western papers, the Chinese experts aren't really debunking the Yeren. They're taking a different approach, and intellectuals, experts, STEM experts in other fields are hopping into the game. And there are government officials, there are professional writers who are working on this. If you want to be a cool party member or party official, why not make a little piece in the Yeren for your local paper? And they'll be like, oh, deputy vice subprime assistant to the subprime deputy actual. He gets it. I wish I could vote. I'd vote for him.
Yeah. And just a reminder, the IVPP is the Institute of Vertebrate Paleontology and Paleoanthropology.
So let's go into some of the inclusions of this kind of lore, I guess is the appropriate term here, kind of into popular culture and into literature. So since it was the social trend, as much as it was a scientific trend, there's not much of a surprise that Yeren fever started to expand beyond nonfiction and into the world of literary fiction. Plays were written, novels, poems, the lines between genres was being crossed just as much as the line between science and kind of zeitgeisty pop culture was being crossed. Maybe, if not crossed, then certainly blurred.
Mm-hmm.
It feels a little bit like the propaganda thing is working.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And you have to wonder, too, about motivation. We have not spoken with these scientists directly, by the way. Many of them have passed away. But the science does continue. Imperfect as it may be, there are legitimate good faith inquiries. In 1981, the newly minted Chinese Anthropological Society has their first get together, right? And in that get together, they endorse the establishment of the Chinese Yeren Investigative Research Association. This is a level of official approval that simply had not existed in the Western world for things like Bigfoot, or in the United States in particular. And this association grows to have hundreds and hundreds of members, and the majority of these members are legit scientists. And the goal to find the Yeren still exists in step with the goal to push science over fantasy. So they're saying the Yeren is an organism, a living thing, right? That eats, sleeps, and shits and reproduces. It is not MPs, obviously, and is not a legend, a ghost, or a spirit. So this means that Yeren fever also becomes socially powerful for people. They can challenge these once sacrosanct cognitive institutions like the hard belief in ghosts. They can also kind of ask themselves what the Yeren tells them about themselves. It's a really rapidly industrializing nation. It's in a deep, I don't want to call it an identity crisis, but it's in an interrogation of its own national identity. So now the Yeren is representing an opportunity to ask questions about the line between man and animal, science, superstition. People are reading about the Yeren and they're saying, what does it mean for me to be a human today? So it hits the zeitgeist perfectly. It's a bullseye, you know? And then we have to get to we have to say it. I don't love saying it because I think we're having a fun time with this exploration, but did they ever actually find one?
No.
Do they ever?
Not that we know of. Not that we know of. I love a world where maybe they did find a Yeren. It was far more intelligent than they assumed, and it gave them some like rousing Al Pacino, Ted Lasso speech, and they said, "Okay, we'll keep your secret." But as far as we know, that didn't happen either. The theories are increasingly scientifically based. The idea that it could maybe have been descended from Gigantopithecus. Mao believed that was documented in old imperial era writing. He definitely didn't think it was supernatural stuff. We know that people became increasingly, I would say, first more secular and then more skeptical as time went on. There's the idea, I thought we'd love this one, in 1979, a scholar named Shang Yu Cheng started advancing this idea that's already familiar to Western cryptozoology. And he basically said, look, the people who are giving us all these eyewitness reports, they're not experts. You know what I mean? They are not themselves biologists or botanists or what have you. They may have seen something and then they mistook it for an extraordinary creature because of the circumstances. I feel like that's a little dismissive because, as we know, when you grow up and spend your entire life in a specific area of the world, a specific, stretch of woods, you get to know those woods pretty well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it reminds me of, I'm going to bring it back to Department of Truth one more time, guys. It reminds me of this concept of once you believe hard enough in something, or once enough people believe in something, it kind of becomes more true. And I'm not saying that it creates a Yeren out there, but now that the popular culture has swelled to a point where it feels as though it could be a thing out there lurking in the woods, you are probably more likely to mistake something that's far out in the distance or a certain sound that you're not familiar with, even if you are familiar with the woods, as like possibly this other thing, right?
Right. It's the pattern you're primed to accept at that point.
I feel like that's a strong thing in all cultures when there is a tale of something like this that might be lurking out there.
100%. And I'll see you on that and add another factor that should be considered, which is that imagine you're growing up in a non-wealthy rural part of China. The urban and intellectual elites have historically just talked so much smack about you and been rude and dismissive. And now all of a sudden you have the opportunity to be an expert on a thing. The Yeren therefore becomes a possible means of income, right? I'm a guide now on an expedition. And perhaps more importantly than the money, now people who did not respect me are listening to me. So if I have therefore a Yeren story, then I have raised to some degree my social status. That's just a sad part of human dynamics, right? We also know, all right, this guy we mentioned, Shang, he said untrained observers might be mistaken. And he pointed to one of our favorite examples. It's just how Western science eventually proved mermaids were probably just marine mammals sighted by extremely horny, desperately lonely sailors, to the point about primed to see a pattern.
Boom.
You know what I mean? I mean, you think a manatee's ugly, man, but spend 8 months at sea and then check back in.
Or don't. Just don't.
No, you can always write us. You can write us.
I think manatees have a certain kind of uncanny beauty to them, personally.
Yeah, we're coming from, a very anthrocentric aspect. They probably think we're ugly as sin. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we're way too hairy.
We're way too hairy.
Speak for yourself. Yeah. I'm just hairy enough.
Oh.
So these later scholars will also, we're talking about this a little bit off air, later scholars, especially Western ones like writing in 2021 and in more recent years, they'll often posit that the myth of the Yeren is based on early encounters in Central and Western China with more Semitic or European people who would tend to have more facial hair, would definitely speak unknown languages, and maybe a real shock to see them in the woods. But then the question becomes, why were they naked?
Well, that's the way to be.
It is. The natural state.
Yeah. I'm not kidding, boys. If you saw me just out naked in the woods in my natural state before I found Manscaped, you would not know what to think.
Not an ad. Hashtag not an ad.
So, yeah, we're actually not working with Manscaped. We're now working with Yerenscaped.
Exactly. There we go.
Which how far do we want to go into this? No, because it's the opposite of Manscaped. It's a thing you rub on and it just like creates strips of hair where you rub it so that you can cover yourself in hair, which is, you guys, listen to this episode years in the future. It's going to be prescient. You're welcome. Yerenscaped, 15% off.
If you could come up with that, whoever you are listening to that, and you just had a light bulb go off, you would make billions of dollars.
Yeah, we're not saying 15% off when you order. We're saying if you come up with it, 15% for us.
Yeah.
You can pay us in Bigfoot hair. So anyway, we know this social context of China. It helps create this craze, but it also complicates it because China is attempting to explain things through a very localized perspective. We mentioned embracing the concept of evolution, but I don't know if every Westerner knows this. There's a popular belief in China that is sometimes accepted as hard science that modern humans did not originate on the African continent, that instead they originated in China and then spread from there. So the Yeren was used to justify that by some authors.
That's very interesting. And there's something I want to bring up here. I think this is a good place to do it. Recently, Popular Mechanics wrote a story about footprints, a very specific set of footprints from a tetrapod. So that's just a 4-legged creature that theoretically, where they found it, when they found it within the fossil record, it pushes back the development of a type of humanity, right? Not necessarily Homo erectus or Homo sapien, but way far back. It pushes forward the development of tetrapods by 40 million years, potentially, which means we really could have some of our stuff way, way wrong. I mean, only because what we know is what we found thus far, and maybe we just haven't found those things, including all of these missing links, right? Including all of the time scales and timelines that are mysterious to us.
Yeah, and I think that's a salient point. That's why it's also interesting to go back and revisit these episodes as more investigation continues. We're continually learning, and by we, I mean modern society, human and not, we're continually learning that the timeline is a little bit longer than people thought it was. And that's why lost civilizations are also another fascinating explanation. We still don't know what caused the Bronze Age collapse. We have no idea. Yeah. Somewhere along the line, things just screwed up. And we still don't know so many things about what, when, and where breakthroughs in evolution occurred.
Oh, yeah. And by the way, that 40 million years thing makes me think about I can't remember the name of the theory that there was potentially another advanced civilization that
Silurian hypothesis.
Silurian that was potentially not based in ape human intelligence and advancement, but in maybe reptilian advancement or something other.
And Matt is spot on with that, folks. We do have an episode on that. Whoa, we went through a phase with that one. I remember it. And the researchers there phrase that as a thought experiment, but they make such a compelling argument for that conspiracy. We also know that the Yeren fever has largely faded, but it's still got a significant mark on society. The IVPP, their magazine Fossils, a little while back, they decided to stop publishing papers about the Yeren because none of the expeditions produced any solid proof. But then after that, they did a poll in their magazine, and the poll had some surprising results. These are all Chinese nationals who get polled. 32% of the people in the poll say they don't believe the Yeren ever existed. We got something wrong in the folklore. 23% say, I think it was around at some point. And like so many other animals, it went extinct. And then 17%, almost 20% of the people that they asked, they said, yeah, I don't know, man. It might be around. Like, I've never been to that forest. I've never seen a giant salamander, but I have Google, I could see it. It's not impossible. And so all of this means that the Yeren is still kind of retreated to the position of fringe science, similar to that of the Western Bigfoot. But the weirdest thing is, as we record Friday, May 23rd, the search continues today. What do we think, guys? Do we want to give an absolute yes/no on Yeren? Do we want to poll ourselves?
I'm going to say maybe. No, I think it might be a no from me, dog.
Might be a no for Noel.
I don't know. I'm jumping over to China Daily real quick. Reading a little article here about nature observers and how the job postings in 2024, in July, list that one of the things you need to be a nature observer is to have the capability of outrunning Yeren. So, I mean, hey, come on.
I mean, no matter how you want to pun it, it's always a good idea to outrun Yeren. Don't let the Yeren run on you. Is the lesson. It is. Is it, Matt? From your sense, when you're reading that, is that meant to be like fun, satirical, or does it feel like okay?
Yeah, I'm being fun and satirical about it. I think if you destroy Like if you go to the absolute position of this is hogwash and dumb and we shouldn't think about it, I think that it defeats the point of it, which is just it's a way to get people out in the woods.
Yeah.
And that's
Go
important.
explore.
Humans plus woods equals probably a cooler civilization. Just because when you hang out in nature like that, you see things a little differently, I think.
It has hard physiological effects on the human as well, like beneficial effects. I would say all we need to caveat that with is humans hanging out in the woods without destroying the woods.
Hey, that's cool.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Only you can prevent forest fires and urine attacks.
Yes. Yeah. So go camping. That's one of our takeaways.
Yeah. In order for urine to attack, doesn't it always kind of require a slight downhill slope? That's the only way that it can, advance.
It depends on the pressure of the system, I think.
And you're talking about city urine.
That's right. You're talking about country urine.
Yeah. Okay. We brought the prejudice back. Yeah. It's a good question. This is the last note we always like to end on with cryptid episodes. Humanity, as you hear this, is reaching one of the most profound periods in history. As humans continue to encroach into wild areas and as surveillance technology has more and more sophisticated breakthroughs year over year, human civilization is now more than ever, thank you, Fox News, likely to find undiscovered animals. And there's a ticking clock on this. There's a time window because those animals, those same organisms, are now more than likely going extinct. We're in the middle of what is called the sixth great mass extinction. So we want to hear from you, folks. Tell us about the Yeren. Tell us if you've seen a Bigfoot or some hominid cryptid, and tell us what, if any, creatures you think may be discovered in the coming decades. We're going to call it evening. We're off to Noctivigate and do our Bigfoot hoots, that thing. Remember that?
Yeah.
And while we're practicing our Bigfoot accent, we'd love to hear from you. You can give us a good old-fashioned email. You can call us on the phone. You can find us on the lines.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist on Facebook with our Facebook group, Here's Where It Gets Crazy, on X, FKA Twitter, and on YouTube, where we have tons of video content for your perusing enjoyment. On Instagram and TikTok, on the other hand, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show.
We have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. We need you to call in. We're running low on voicemails. You gotta call in. Do you have a thought? Call in. It's 1-833-STDWYTK. Call that number. Leave a voicemail. You get 3 minutes. Give yourself a cool nickname and say whatever you'd like. Do let us know within the message if we can use your name and message on the air. If you got more to say than can fit in 3 minutes, or you want to type something out, send, I don't know, pictures, links, anything. Why not instead send us an email? We are
the entities that read every piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. As a matter of fact, we'll be following up with some correspondence for several of you just after these next recordings. So join us out here in the dark, and please, please, please tell us your favorite cryptid. Tell us the stories. We love them. They make our evenings. Conspiracy at iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.